Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew. As always, that's absolutely everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast, though, well, title gives it away. I'm here to talk of the stories of films, and I tend to talk about development stories, production stories, marketing stories, release stories, all those ingredients, really, that go towards making the films that we know and sometimes love, just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. Now, what you've happened upon here is one of my occasional special episodes of the podcast where I bring in a filmmaker and talk about their latest release or their body of work. And in the case of this particular special episode, a bit of both, really. I'm joined for this one by British movie director Jon Wright. On the eve, we chatted of the release of his latest film, Unwelcome, written by Mark Stay, which is in cinemas in the UK from the 27th of January 2023. Now, this is a horror movie, a British horror movie that's getting a wide release from a major American studio, Warner Brothers, and this is a real rarity. And so part of what we're about to discuss will be exploring that story. But also I'm going to go through as you're about to hear, I'm going to go through Jon Wright's body of work, from directing his breakthrough movie, Tormented. Then he moved on to a little seen but much loved, I really love this film, film called Grabbers, written by Kevin Lahane, and an Irish horror comedy that's an absolute delight. He then teamed up with Mark Stay for the film Robot Overlords, a hugely ambitious science fiction movie made on a very light budget in the UK as well, and again another film that punched above his weight. You're going to hear too elements of a story of Jon Wright trying to adapt a 2000 AD comic strip by the name of Slaine. If you're unfamiliar with 2000 AD, ordinarily I would explain things like that in the preamble. In this particular case, I would just go and dig out copies of it. It is an iconic British comic, gave us the likes of Judge Dredd, but in particular it was the Slaine strip that took Jon Wright's attention. That really is all you need to know going into this one. We talk fairly candidly about the ups and downs of Wright's career and what led to Unwelcome. We go very spoiler light on the film, as you're about to hear. So let me just play you a clip from the trailer from Unwelcome, and then we'll go straight into my conversation with Jon Wright after this.
We've been gifted this beautiful house.
We live here. Can you believe it?
Maeve wanted to keep the place in your family, Jamie.
We really appreciate the house.
Well, then you know. It's got a hole in the roof.
The Whelans, they'll do a good job.
Jamie, there.
You just carry on with your day as if we weren't here.
There is one thing I need to show you, and it's a little bit peculiar. Every evening before sunset, she'd leave a blood offering here.
Sorry, did you say blood? For who?
For the red caps. They'll need feeding. They'll be hungry.
So that was a clip from the trailer from the film Unwelcome, and I'm delighted to be joined for this Film Stories podcast special by its director and co-writer, Jon Wright. Hello, Jon Wright. How are you?
Hello, Simon Brew. I'm very well, thank you.
Well, you're in very glamorous surroundings, certainly compared to mine, and you're
Yes.
on the eve of. I think we should say straight up, our paths have crossed several times over the years. Back in my Den of Geek days, I was writing about your first and second film, Tormented, then Grabbers, then your third, Robot Overlord. So we're going to come to all of those. But the one thing I never asked you, and because one of the things about this podcast is, I just want to hold ladders, really. And I'm just kind of curious what your journey was to get to Tormented, which was your first film. What were the,
wow.
So what were the things you were bashing against there, and how did you manage to make a film?
Well, that was a very painful journey indeed.
Yeah, I sort of knew that bit, and I'm just wondering how much you're happy to talk about.
Yeah, I'll talk about it. Yeah, of course. Well, I am. I suppose I'm the opposite of a nepo baby, which is the term that seems to be flying around the internet at the moment. because I didn't have anybody to help me.
Yeah.
So you're trying to get into a gentleman's club, aren't you?
Yes.
I mean, it is a gentleman's club. Let's be honest. It's not just a club. And I didn't have the password. I didn't know what to say when the little sliding window went back. So it took ages to break in, really did, And in the meantime, I was directing commercials, pop videos, corporate videos, and then all the time making short films. And the short films were the good things.
Yeah.
So that's how I did it, really. I just made short film after short film. I probably made one every year. And when I was 11, I think it was about 11, I went to see Raiders of the Lost Ark with a Japanese friend of mine, a guy called Akio Ito. I remember that day very well. And for, the running time of the movie, I was completely transported. I was in nirvana, really. It was kind of the nearest thing I've had to a mystical, magical experience. And after that, I came out and I said to Akio, that was the best film I've ever seen. And then I wanted to make films, So I tried making a film the following year, which was a little short slasher film with the very catchy title, Insane.
So how old were you when you were making your first slasher film?
I was 12.
12, of course.
So I didn't have any money. So that was again was the catch. So I was going around and knocking on the door of all the posh people I knew and saying, could I borrow your video camera?
Is that genuinely how you did it? You went door to door trying to like borrow a camera?
Yeah, I borrowed a camera and then couldn't edit it because editing video is nigh on impossible. At least it was in those days. Yeah. You'd have to do machine to machine. It didn't work. So I started, then the next film I made, I tried to edit it in camera, which I don't recommend.
Yeah.
So then you've got to wind back, you shoot the take, and if it doesn't work, you've got to wind back and record over it. And, so it was a long journey.
I see that going on now with filmmakers coming through who are putting stuff on TikTok.
Yeah.
And the assumption is a lot of TikTok, because as easy as it is to be snobby about TikTok, and lots of people are, there's loads of filmmaking stuff on there. And I watched a video on there just last year of someone who was just basically compiling the most sophisticated thing just because they planned their shots.
Yeah.
So, a couple of decades apart, but the kind of ethos doesn't sound much different. Yeah,
I think if I was a filmmaker today, for sure that's what I'd be doing. I'd be making things for TikTok. I think what's great now, what's so fantastic is, even if you've got an iPhone, it's pretty good quality. The quality and the ability to edit and the ability to find music that you can stick on for free, and just the technicalities are a lot more achievable, which obviously makes it harder because it's more competitive. But, that was the big thing I was up against, I just didn't have the resources, and you look at Steven Spielberg, and I think one of the reasons he got to be such a good filmmaker so quickly was that his dad, who felt guilty about divorcing his mum, bought him a fabulous array of Super 8 gear.
Yeah.
And, I just never had that.
Well, and now he's made a film about that, effectively.
He has indeed, which I haven't seen, sadly. Have you seen it?
I have seen it. It's fun. It's fun. It's interesting, but it's kind of I think it's going to have its fans. But I'm just thinking it's a film made for quite a niche audience. That is,
of course, yes.
And it's a really well made, really engaging film. But it's like someone's home movie.
Yeah,
it's just like my home movie. No one would look at it on YouTube. He gets like Oscar nominations and stuff like that, and all power to him.
Well, so, I guess he's got to that stage in his career where he's entitled to have his home movie.
Yeah.
So we don't mind him. We don't begrudge him having it.
Well, he's made enough good films, hasn't he? I mean, who wouldn't be with that Crystal Skull? That's the one. So that was so. In the 1980s, you were a pre-teen making slasher movies, but it was 2009, I think, off the top of my head, that Tormented, your first feature, came.
Yeah.
And so, that's. You talk about being on the outside trying to bash in. That's a lot of bashing. Then, were there any near misses in that time?
It was a long, arduous bash. And I went in. I went in and did a lot of pitching and trying to get. I had a movie before that, a horror movie, which I'd worked up with John le Carré's son, a guy called Nick Cornwell. It was actually, I thought, a very, very good horror movie about a horror movie that if you told it to somebody, they believed it, and then it came true. So it was called True Story. It's like a viral story that. Once you'd heard it, you were doomed to enact it.
The spoken version of Paper House, something like that.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, and it was, exceptionally violent and all that stuff. And I went around and pitched it to everybody in town, and I did come close. Like there was a lot of interest, but it's just tough when you haven't made a movie. they're just very nervous about risking
Yeah.
anything on you, financially. And when you've made a movie, you understand that.
Yeah.
When I was on the other side of it, I was endlessly frustrated because I was like, why won't they let me make a movie? And once I'd made one, it was obviously the first long thing I'd ever made. Everything else I'd ever made took 2 or 3 days to finish.
Yeah.
2 or 3 days to shoot, sorry. So, that's easy. That's like a sprint, So you can just kind of suck up all your courage and run, and you'll be all right. When you make a movie, you're running a marathon. So it's a very different animal, It's no coincidence that some of the best filmmakers who've got off to the most flying starts have done a lot of television, because they'd already got used to the marathon.
I'm hearing this a lot at the minute. Yeah.
Whether it's Edgar Wright or Spielberg or Danny Boyle, they're people that had got used to the long form and they knew what it felt like to shoot for a month.
Yeah.
But a lot of the people who, like me, were kind of weaned on short films, you just got a bit of a shock, and week 2, week 3, I was like, oh my God, I'm exhausted.
And so, because it is the Steven Spielberg piece of advice he gives to directors, is invest in some nice shoes.
Yeah.
Apparently. So
yeah,
I trust your shoes are fine.
Wear comfortable shoes, which I understand because I tend to pace a lot on set. I kind of get excited.
Yeah.
So I'm just excited to be on a film set, and it's even more exciting that it's my film set. And so I tend to pace, and I have to actively say to myself, stop pacing, go and sit in the chair. And when you see these old hands, the Ridley Scotts or whatever,
yeah.
they never get out of the chair.
He apparently has a nap chair, doesn't he?
Yes, exactly.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
You've made it then.
Hitchcock used to call action, and then he'd be asleep by the time, and somebody else would have to cut. That's how you should do it if you don't want to have sore feet anyway.
So, how did you get Tormented, which was your first film? What was the point where you broke through the finish tape?
Okay, so I'm going to be honest here because it's quite an old movie. So they came to me with the script and they said, "You like horror movies, don't you? Because you've been pitching this one round town that you haven't managed to get away.
Yeah."
We've got this one about a zombie ghost that avenges itself on a bullied kid who commits suicide and then avenges himself on his tormentors. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Now, I read the script and I thought, I don't know really if this is, my Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah.
I don't think it is, if I'm being completely honest. And they've got £500,000, which probably isn't enough. In fact, it was less than that. I think it was more like 350.
Yeah.
It's not enough money. But I just need to get into the club. I have to make my first movie. I've been waiting so long. I've just got to go for it. So it's this film. And I put everything into it. I put heart and soul, and I drew every single set piece, and I gave it everything I had. But I mean, the writer had never written a movie before. I don't think he'd mind me saying this. A guy called Stephen Prentice is a very nice man. And when he saw the first cut of the movie, he said, "Oh my God, why did I argue with you?"
Well, you've told me before about the fact that it had basically 2 different tones competing with itself a little, but you couldn't see that at the point of making it.
No, I again, because I'd only worked on short things, really the tone of a short thing takes care of itself.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't really enough time for it to shift. Whereas the tone of a long thing can shift all over the place. It can go from, as Tormented did, it can go from quite kind of kitchen sinky slice of life naturalism to sort of ultra goofy off the wall comedy.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have a handle on the tone. And to be fair, one of the producers, there's a lady called Tracy Brim, kept saying to me, I don't know about the tone seems to be slipping around. And I thought, I don't even know what tone means. That's how I felt. I don't know what you mean. I'm just like, if it's funny, it's funny. If it's moving, it's moving. And then of course I saw the film put together and I thought, oh bollocks, we've made 2 films, and Frankenstein them together.
I mean, it's interesting watching Unwelcome, and I have your new film with a Warner Brothers logo at the start. We'll come to that a little bit further down the line. But watching your Unwelcome, you feel it seems you're very in control of that. There's a lot of patience in the shots, and I'm going to really spoiler light on the film. I'll come to the bit where I ask you how much you're happy to give away. But the bits where the sands shift, how's that? You feel it seems you're a lot more in control of than you were in Tormented.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you'll agree. I hope you'll agree that I learned my lesson on tone and I brought it to Grabbers.
Yeah.
So when I made Grabbers, I what you have to do, basically the big lesson on tone is you can't be seduced, and I like nothing more than to stand on set and to laugh and to have an actor make me laugh. That's my happy place. But just because it's funny doesn't mean it belongs in the film.
Yeah.
And we learned that on Grabbers. You can have things that are funny that break the reality of the movie, and once the reality of the movie is broken, you're watching a different thing. You're not really invested in it after that. So we let a lot of jokes go on Grabbers, and people would cook stuff up on set. Like there was a lot of mucking around on that movie.
Yeah.
As there was on Unwelcome, there's a hell of a lot of mucking around on Unwelcome. And people would offer me things like, I could do this. And I would feel the pull, the pull of the seduction. I'd think, oh, I'd love to do this because it's so stupid and it's so funny. But it doesn't make sense. This isn't in the rules of our world. This breaks the rules of our world, which don't necessarily have to be logical, but they have to be consistent. And so I would very, very, with a heavy heart, be a mature person and say, no, we cannot have that.
If only audio could get across the grin on your face as you say that. I mean,
with such a heavy heart, mate. But then, of course, there's the other side of that. Is you might have something that's like super dramatic and like really kind of thrillingly intense, but it's just too dark for this film. Yeah. So for Unwelcome, it can't be depressing. It can never be. It can be dark. It can be crazy, as you know. But I hope it doesn't go to a place of morbidity or solemnity, or you know.
Yeah. No, I don't think it goes there. I don't think it goes there. Tormented. I mean, the thing with Tormented is, because we were watching. I was at Den of Geek at the time. We were getting lots of horror-y films in, and you could sort of sense the ones that were punching above their weight, punching above the material a bit. And clearly, Tormented lit a spark. As much as you've been critical about the movie, there are things in it. I still think there are things in it that really work.
But I still have people coming to me saying, "I love that film," because they saw it at the right age. They saw it when they were at school, basically.
So then you came to Grabbers, written by Kevin Lahane, and I mean, Grabbers, I just adored. I still adore. But my memory of this was I was at a website trying to set up a screening of it, and the distribution of that film seemed to be a nightmare. And you were getting like incredible reviews, and no one could see the film, or it was really tough to. Can you take me into that time a little bit?
Well, basically, we sold it to Sony, and it just was a maths thing, And this happens a lot with indie movies, where the maths just don't work out, So the thing about the Blumhouse films, people always say, "Oh, well, they only cost $5 million to make." Well, yes, that's true, but they make 20 of them a year, and the ones you see, Universal have spent upwards of $30 million promoting. So the cost of the promotion far, far, far exceeds the cost of making the actual film. Which is why when they work, they make fortunes for the filmmakers, but it's expensive. So you're going to be hard pushed to find a studio based in the UK who are going to say, "Yeah, I'll go out on a limb. I'll spend 2-3 million, whatever pounds. I'll spend a lot of money taking this film out to the market and making people know that it actually exists."
Yeah,
with the possibility of losing all that money. And there's not many that will do that. And that's basically what happened with Grabbers, is they were like, look, we could go out and spend all the money, and this is a very commercial film. And when we test it, people really like it and they have good fun.
Yeah.
But we if it doesn't work, it's gonna basically break the studio. So we're just not going to do it. If we do it this way, which is we just put it out, very quickly and easily and cheaply, we'll make all of our money back in by Monday morning.
Yeah.
So that's what happened, unfortunately. And this has happened to me repeatedly, because I've tried to make commercial films.
Well, that's a through line through your movies, and clearly the influence of the films you were watching as you were growing up and trying to capture that spirit is the through line through them.
Of course, I think what's sort of maybe unusual about my career is basically I didn't go to America. I had that window. And I love LA, and I love sitting on the beach in Venice, and I love being up in the Hollywood Hills by somebody's pool. And, I think LA is great. And everyone goes, "Oh God, all anyone ever talks about is movies." And I know, and I say, I know. I fit in so well there. I feel normal. So, and television, of course, you have to say "and television" at the end of nowadays. So, I didn't go. I couldn't go. Basically, my other half at the time, and I've since split up with her, but we had a young son, and she just hated Americans.
Yeah.
She wouldn't even go to LA, let alone countenance the idea of moving there.
Yeah.
So I was sort of, like, as you remember, when we screened Grabbers for Den of Geek, it was a double bill with Colin Trevorrow.
Safety Not Guaranteed.
Exactly.
Two incredible films back to back.
Yeah, and then earlier that week, I was having lunch with Colin, I think, and somebody came up to the table and said, "Oh yeah, James Gunn's Slither, just like Grabbers or something like that." So I was in the same sort of group at that stage, but of course they're all in America and they're in LA, and it's just a different, much bigger industry. It's 10 times the size or whatever it is. I don't know how big it feels. 10 times the size anyway. So I just didn't go. I decided it was more important to raise my son. So there you go. It was a moral decision. Yeah.
I don't think that's a bad.
So I stayed in Whitstable and looked after my son, and then here we are.
But so you came off the back of Grabbers. I mean, Mark Stay came into your life. Your co-writer on Unwelcome as well.
Yes.
And I get the impression Mark Stay is someone who listens to this podcast. So I'm going to say hello to Mark Stay.
Yes, let's say hello to Mark, because Mark loves this podcast. He doesn't just listen to it, Simon. He loves it.
I like Mark.
I think he's listened to every single one. I'm going to check with him afterwards. But honestly,
I will set him a test. I will set him a test of 10 questions.
We do that.
I'll do that. But that was the point you really scaled up. And I know you dampened talk of just how much of the kind of numbers that were being bandied around for the film Robot Overlords, which you came to after Grabbers. Yeah. But that was, I remember when that came out, that was the kind of film that Britain wasn't making and still isn't making. But you talk I just wonder, was that because you hinted around the time I interviewed you around then that you had the option to make that in America and with a lot more money, and it was a degree of control was the thing at that point. Was it a family decision as well not to take that overseas?
Do you know what? It's a funny thing, because when you Google the movie, or it used to be the case anyway, it comes up as like a massive budget, like 25 million, which is absolute bollocks. It was $7 million, 7 million UK. Yeah. Now, for some,
where did you stash the other 10 million? Is it
exactly? Yeah. For some reason, the distributors or the sales agent or somebody on that side was very keen to blow up the budget. I think basically so they could sell it for more money, and they were like, "Look, nobody's going to know that this is a £7 million film. They're going to think it's at least 20. So let's pretend that it is." So that all went around. I was quite annoyed about that, because I thought, well, this is quite an achievement to have done this on 7 million, but on 20 million, it's not quite as good. It's sort of it was a bit frustrating, but what I was trying to do at the time, and I think kind of what's happened really with every film, is I'm trying to make a film for the audience. I'm not literally, like, I don't like consciously think, oh, this is a commercial thing, I'll put that in. But I am that person. I'm the guy who, I have limited patience and short attention span, and I like, violence and jokes and exciting creatures, and I am the genre guy. Yeah, I really love those.
You're the Raiders of the Lost Ark guy.
Exactly. I'm the person who, I love the touches of horror in Raiders of the Lost Ark. That was very exciting to me.
Touches.
Yeah, they are touches, really, aren't they?
Well, once we're into Temple of Doom, we're well beyond touches, aren't we? That's
true.
That's a horror film.
I love that. I love that. And I love those movies. It's not an act. It's not a put on. I think a lot of people start with horror because they're like, I'll do this because you're able to do these films cheap, and they can be quite exciting for cheap. But I'll get out of the ghetto as soon as I get the first chance. I wanted to be in the ghetto, but what I kind of dreamt of, and I don't think I really achieved it, but it was my dream, was could we make a British version of these American genre films that sort of breaks out and gets out to a big audience, and they just enjoy it. They're entertained.
Would it be fair to say the mechanism for British companies to sell British films, with the exception of this one, which we'll come to shortly, certainly at the point you're making Robot Overlords, it just didn't feel quite ready? No. At that point.
What happened, I thought, with Robot Overlords was Stranger Things came out, and I thought, my first thought when I saw Stranger Things was we should have made a TV series.
You did of Robot Overlords.
Well, we did. that was what was happening. And Sky TV basically came to us and said, I mean, a whole bunch of people came to us actually and said, let's make a TV series out of it. And it went into a very tortured development process, which unfortunately didn't work out.
Yeah.
And Mark Stay and I were both relatively naive in the ways of television at that point, because I hadn't really directed any and he hadn't written any.
Yeah.
So we felt like, I felt like I didn't really understand the arc of television. Like I didn't know how stories were told over eight episodes or 6 episodes. I didn't feel confident in that.
Yeah.
I didn't feel confident in the amount of talking that there is in television at that stage. Now, since then, I've directed loads and I do feel like I understand it a lot better. But we abdicated, we knew what we wanted to do with the TV series, but we basically gave it to another writer who was a really fantastic writer called Chris Lunt.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So Chris is had a brilliant pitch and everything. But basically when his script came back, it was like, well, I can tell Chris loves tripods. Let's put it that way.
The TV series
like
tripods.
Yeah, it was like a British tripods, basically. And it was very, very interesting. Like I was well up for directing it. I was like, this is going to be fabulous. But this has got nothing to do with the original movie.
Yeah.
This is not what Sky are here for. Sky basically want to have that robot marching down the street. And they went through umpteen drafts, like I don't know how many drafts, 15 or something. And then eventually, sort of with a heavy heart, they shelved it because they just couldn't get to where they wanted to go. So, I suppose with hindsight, you think maybe Mark and I should have just said, let's go for it. But hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Well, quite. None of us can quite do that, can we?
But I think actually Robot Overlords would have been a better TV show than a movie. I think it would have been perfect on Sky. It would have been, and we could have just stayed in that street and explored all of the sort of all of the conflicts in that little suburban street.
And so, off the back of Robot Overlords, I think you don't mind me saying it didn't set the box office alight.
No,
and
it was the same thing. It was basically, we had a screening at the National Film Theatre, the BFI as it is now.
Yeah.
To a full house of kids, and they loved it. They cheered and they clapped, and then all the distributors met afterwards, and they said, "Well, it's going to cost us 2-3 million quid to release this. Who's going to do it?" So again, it was just the same. It tested like through the roof for the age group it was intended for, which was kind of young teenagers, I think.
Yeah.
It was in the high 90s, as they say. Do you know about test scores and all that?
Oh, yeah. The joys of test scoring, yeah.
The joys, yeah.
Actually, cinemas in Fulham and Wimbledon, isn't it, at the moment?
Oh, yeah. Those sort of crazy, chaotic screenings, yeah. We had great test results, and they were interviewing people after the screen saying, "What would you like in the film to?" And they would say, "Oh, I don't know. It's a bit like Transformers." And then, of course, everyone gets very excited. But then to market a film to the Transformers audience, you've got to spend a lot of money.
Did they mean the animated one?
No.
A bit of Orson Welles. Is that what they were going for?
No, but I like your thinking.
So off the back of Robot Overlords, because the first time you mentioned you and Mark Stay were trying to raise money for an idea of a film was 2016. And I think you were also, I've got memory that you were trying to develop a 2000 AD property.
Oh, yeah.
At that point as well. I don't know if I'm allowed to ask that. I've not named the individual strip, but how close did that get? And then if you can take me into basically, it sounds like a 4-year journey just to try and sell what became Unwelcome. Okay,
so I think we can talk about it. I'm just thinking, I'm not the most discreet person, Simon.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have to help me with your editing scissors if I say something I shouldn't.
Yeah, you just leave that to me.
Okay, that sounds like a deal. Well, basically, I became very friendly with Pat Mills, who was one of the original 2000 AD guys. He's a lovely.
His memoir he's fantastic. Pat
How is
Mills
it? Do you know what? I haven't read his memoir, and I should do.
I'm going to send that audio clip to him now. Yeah.
Okay. I love Pat. I think he's a brilliant guy. Now, as you know, he wrote a bunch of seminal strips for 2000 that I grew up on that I absolutely loved when they were like a window onto some extraordinary universe when I was a kid. And Slaine or Slaine was one of my favorites. And, when in my 20s, when I was listening to a lot of Britpop and electronica, and maybe partaking in various illegal substances.
You just tell me where you want the edits, John. I'm right here for you. Keep going.
There's nothing I like more than to read Slaine. I love
while drinking Ribena, a bit of Vimto, and a couple of wagon wheels. I got it.
Exactly. Yes. Well, having a couple of Haribo and laying back on the sofa. So I mean, I was sort of quite obsessed by that, really, by Slaine. And so, yeah, I went on a little journey where Piers, who produced my last 3 movies, who's an incredible producer, he and I went on a journey where we went out to secure the rights to Slaine, thinking, let's make it, let's. And again, I think, I was banging that drum of thinking, well, there's the Americans over there doing their Marvel adaptations. We've got 2000 AD, which is just a treasure trove of incredible characters and stories, and they should be our Marvel, So not in the same way, so for my money, Marvel are doing like the major label, they're like Britney Spears and I don't know, who do you think?
I'm not digging you out of this hole. I'm fascinated.
Well, dig me out of it. Who's the little red-haired guy?
Who's the little what?
Plays his tiny little guitar. Who's he? Ed Sheeran. So they're Ed Sheeran, and we should be like, at the time.
I write a list of questions sometimes, and I think, the answers to these will be predictable. No, don't.
You perfected the silent laugh, which is good. That's the reason.
I'm not laughing. I'm looking sternly and disapprovingly. You know that.
Yes, you are. You're very stern, actually, like a school teacher. But but we should be the indie label.
Yeah.
We should be like the Stone Roses or the Arctic Monkeys.
Yeah.
Not actually trying to do those types of massive movie, but doing our version of it, like a kind of a cool version of the genre thing. That was how I saw it anyway. And I love Ireland, and I am actually technically Irish, although it's hard to believe.
No, we've had that chat before, yeah. Yeah,
so born and bred in Ireland. So I was just mad keen to do it. And we actually, to cut a long story short, I thought we got the rights.
So the two words
that was my understanding, Simon.
I was going to say, the 2 words there are I and thought, which presumably you didn't have the rights.
It turned out that we didn't.
Okay.
At a later date.
Okay.
The understanding that we had the rights turned out to be incorrect.
This has to be surgical questioning, I presume. So how long was what time scale was between the moment where you thought you had the rights and you learned you didn't?
Probably like about 3 or 4 months.
Oh, so you'd sunk headspace.
Yeah, I had a good meeting. I went to meet the man in question, the man who holds the rights, and we had a very good meeting. We chatted. We talked about Slaine's axe and the dimensions of that axe and what it would be made out of, and what armor he might be wearing, and all that. He was very interested in all of that.
They got quite granular.
Yeah, I mean, very granular, I thought. I mean, we had a gentleman's agreement, did a little handshake, and
And then you just get a phone call or something.
Yeah, no, we just went into sort of that legal world that you sometimes go into in the film world, where the lawyers are sort of padding something back and forward, and it's just gone a bit weird, like it's going through treacle, and when are we actually going to ink the deal? And the deal just went on, and we found out that there was some very sort of excited conversations going on behind the scenes, like, do you realize you're about to lose the rights to one of the greatest comic creations? You need to buy them right now. And we were basically being used as leverage to try and get bigger fish to bite, which they didn't.
Well, I mean, let's go to happier times then, as we're coming towards the end of our time, and we're sort of.
This is part of film development. Yeah. That's it. I'm not like terrifically bitter about it or anything. It's just like, I think if you're a filmmaker, you have to have 3 irons in the fire, and that's about a good average, and then one of those irons will kind of take off.
Well, tell me about you and Mark Stay making Mischief then. About what state the project Unwelcome was in 2016, and if you ever dreamed at that point that it would head into UK cinemas with a Warner Brothers logo and a big marketing campaign, a very tasty poster as well.
Very tasty poster, yeah. It was a funny one, Unwelcome, because so the genesis of the film was we were talking about the fact that Mark and I were cowards, and we were basically laughing at ourselves and at each other and saying about going through various experiences we had where we'd sort of disgraced ourselves by behaving terribly cowardly, and how we dressed it up as being pacifists, but really, you know, that was just a nice word for it.
Yeah.
But then we got into the conversation about our kids, and we both got kids, and we said, well, look, if our kids were threatened, that would be a different story, and we might be quite violent in that situation. And not only would we be violent as people who are useless at fighting, we would probably grab whatever's to hand, you know, like a blunt implement, and we would try and make the fight be over as soon as possible, which is, you know, escalating it really.
Yeah.
So there wouldn't be any Queensberry rules or anything like that. And that to us was like an interesting premise, because we thought, well, how can pacifists be violent? You know, that doesn't make sense. That's a paradox. That's a good question. That's a good dramatic question. So that's what we tried to explore. We thought, okay, let's push. Let's take two liberal metropolitan Londoners who are very much self-avowed pacifists, and let's push them. Let's push them hard, and let's see what it takes to turn them into violent people. So that was the premise of the movie. Now, Mark then said, I'm going to write this. And we've been talking about Irish myths and legends and fairy tales, and we've been scrubbing around looking for something interesting there. And of course, we come across redcaps, who are these goblins who dip their caps in the blood of their victims. And we, you know, that was kind of attractive to me, because I thought that's sort of like the anti-leprechaun.
Yeah.
And one of the things you get, I've worked in Ireland a lot and worked with a lot of Irish crews, is they hate that whole thing. It's sort of Begorra bejesus, the image of the leprechaun that you see on Irish pubs all around Europe. You know, and I thought this is interesting because it's sort of on the surface of it, it's a leprechaun, but really you dig a bit deeper, it's actually quite a nasty piece of work, and doesn't have a kind of cute cap and a fishing rod and have those sort of gnome-like qualities. And they take a kind of, you can infer from the fact they're dipping their caps in the blood of their victims, that they take a pleasure in their work, that they enjoy their work, which I think you'll agree the goblins in the film also enjoy their work.
Well, tell me what I'm allowed to talk about with the film.
I think whatever you think. You know, you're the
right,
film.
Well, the ending. What happened? No.
Yeah, well, the best bit.
Yeah.
You know, you're the film nerd who hates spoilers.
I do hate spoilers.
So what would you just go to the edge of what you would think is acceptable for you, and I'll join you there.
Okay, so I mean, you've let the cat out of the bag, really, in terms of the creatures. So that's the bit I didn't know was coming, because I haven't watched but my rule these days is I don't watch trailers. I try to read synopses, so you never quite know what you're going to get. And so I mean, the film is very, very patient, and by that I'm not trying to do a backhanded compliment. It's just like your shots you hold for a long time. There's no quick cut. There's no dancing around. And it's what I was saying before. It just feels very, very deliberate in what you're doing. So when you do start to reveal things, I mean, you seem to be having an awful lot of fun.
Yeah, too much fun. Do you think that's possible, to be on a set and to have too much fun? Because I wonder about that.
I mean, that's your question rather than mine, isn't it? I mean, but I'll write it down and ask it you.
I felt like we were having too much fun.
It is a cliche, isn't it? That filmmaking is supposed. There's the old cliche that if it's a miserable set, the film's really good. Right, it's a happy set. The film, and I've had this disproved so many times, but still, it just keeps bouncing up and down as if you're supposed to be in a foul mood all the time when you're making a film.
I think it depends on the sort of filmmaker you are. I'm very much like, somebody likened me to the Pied Piper once. They said I'm the sort of person who's like, come on, come with me, and then I lead everybody over the cliff, you know, to their doom. But they enjoy it.
Did you ever play Lemmings on the
exactly.
Amigo? That would be it. Okay.
Exactly. Like I'm the guy dancing at the head of the Lemmings. So that's my way of directing, and I tend to like a happy, harmonious, collaborative set. I mean, I work really hard, so I lead by example like that. Yeah. Like I lean into it. I'm very industrious, and I expect that of everyone who works with me. But I don't want any screaming and shouting. I don't want any displays of petulance or bad temper. I'm a bit more lenient with the actors, because I think what they do is quite strange, and they sort of have moments because of their emotions are rumbling around, and but certainly with a crew, but we can all have good fun. And I think I'd like to think on the set of Unwelcome there was a real sense of I don't know what you call it, joie de vivre, like we were really enjoying ourselves. But I think there's other directors who have different personalities. That's my personality. I'm very calm by nature. There's other directors who you've got to be yourself, basically, is what I'm saying. So I think if you are an angry man or woman, if that is your nature, if life makes you angry, you just got to be angry when you're a director, and that's kind of how it is, So I think this is where this thing of some of these sets, I'm sure you've had the same thing where if I find out about some of my heroes, people that I've absolutely loved their movies, and you just find out they're horrible on set. They're just like real nasty.
Comment.
Exactly. They're just
no comment.
They're just taskmasters, and they love to bully and belittle, and they love to scream and shout, and but that's their personality. If that's how you are, that's how you've got. What I've learned, I think, is that you've got to express yourself, and you've got to kind of be yourself, and you've got to show people how you feel, and that's whatever form that takes.
It's in view of the protection of spoilers that I've held most of the questions back on Unwelcome, because I do want to talk to you about it again at some point in the future. Right. I'm conscious we're running slightly short of time, so there's two quick things I just want to ask you if I can just squeeze in. The first of all is we're hearing a lot of pandemic stories when it comes to filmmaking at the moment, and it's just like that, and they're as much fun to answer as they are to ask. But the one thing yours is slightly different is you sold this film at a virtual Cannes Film Festival. Is that right? Is that how it ultimately came together?
Well, actually, it was a very funny one, because basically we were going to make a little teaser where, the door at the foot of the garden, the little door beside the door.
Yes, I think that there's a door on a poster. I think we can get away with that.
Yeah, there's a sort of, so there's a big door and a little door beside the big door.
Yep, you're quite right.
Yeah. Yep. So we were going to have a little teaser where we just basically the camera would come down and it would peer through the little door, and you would see a glimpse of something goblinish.
Yeah.
And that was what we were going to do. And then, of course, COVID arrived, and it wasn't possible to put a crew together. So instead, I said, well, look, why don't I just talk to the camera? I'll explain why the film is going to be really great, and I'll cut in all the references from all the movies that are going to play a part in building a picture of how this film is going to play out. So, I cut in shots from Gremlins, I cut in shots from Cat's Eye.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that, but that goes a bit spoilery, which was the film that terrified me in the 1980s more than any other.
Yes, well, that Cat's Eye informed how we did the Goblins to a great.
Interesting.
Yeah,
they've
so
just released it in 4K, and I bought it, and I can't watch it.
Yeah, I love the final story.
The first one's amazing as well. James Woods in Quitters Inc., which is the game, like about 15 years early.
It's true, actually. I hadn't thought of it like that. Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
of course, Drew Barrymore on the dashboard. Good God.
That's right. And of course, the first two were Stephen King stories, but that last one wasn't. And I don't know who cooked that last one up, because it's very good.
I hate them.
Yeah. So very good. That final third film is very good, I think. But yes. So anyway, I did a pitch to camera, and we cut in all these films. We added a little bit of music, and it was pretty good. And we sent it out. And of course, we had everybody's attention because they were all working from home on Zoom, and within 24 hours, we had it financed.
Good God!
So everybody we sent it to 5 people. Everybody wanted to read it, and within 24 hours, it was financed. So that never happens normally.
No,
never, ever, ever, ever.
And you were just sat at home, looking at a screen, watching these offers come in.
Yeah, and I thought, well, I might do one of these pitch videos again.
Yeah. Well, it's your natural charm. There will be people listening to this who'll want to know where to send you a check.
Yes, well, they should. They should. But, yeah, it was unusual. So it took a year to write, but and I have to say this is something worth mentioning. Mark Stay, your most avid listener,
Hello, Mark.
about halfway through, so he showed me a draft, and I said, "Look, Mark, I don't know, mate. I mean, it's got a lot of good things, it's got a lot of bad things, but it needs a lot of work." And I gave him like pretty harsh set of notes, pretty punishing. And I know him well enough, he and I are good friends, and I know I can just tell. I don't have to, handle him with kid gloves. I just told him, gave him the bare, unvarnished, horrific reaction,
Yeah.
And I said, look, we're not being paid for this. If you want to give up on it, I completely understand, because right now I'm not there. I don't think I could direct this. I can see there's a lot of good things in it. And he was like, no, I believe in this. I really think this is going to be good. This is just a first draft. It's just rough and ready, and it's a bit crap, and I don't mind showing it to you because I trust you, and it's going to be fine. And he was the one who went away and drove it forward. And then he came back with I don't know if it's the next draft, but certainly a far, far, far superior draft. And I read it and I was like, this is brilliant.
Yeah.
I've gone from not wanting to make it to really, really wanting to make it. And this was a sort of slightly charmed process. So I was like, look, I've got not a lot to add here, a couple of tweaks here and there. Mark might remember it differently.
Yeah.
He might remember like, oh yes, those 2 months of never ending.
This tyrant. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The never ending pedantry and tweaking and,
the therapy,
driving him mad. But my memory of it is pretty much we took it directly to Piers, the producer, and Piers had the same thing. He was like, this is great. Let's get some concept art done and let's go, And so it was a very, very fast path to production. But then, of course, the flip side of that was COVID probably helped us getting that finance, because we had everybody's attention and they were looking for things that could be relatively contained and didn't have loads of extras. But then on the other end, we were gearing up to release the movie, and then they were like, well, the post-COVID box office isn't great. And so unfortunately it stalled the release of the movie. So I guess it gave with one hand and took with the other hand. But,
Well, I mean, my last question really, I just want to take you back to that young boy coming out of a screening of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
And now you sit, I know, as a fan of genre films, I just get the sense this will mean the absolute world to you, to have a Warner Brothers logo and a big studio release of your genre film. I just wonder if you can kind of capture that for us, and what that boy back in the before he went and made his slasher movies underage. I mean, could you even dream of something like that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Did I actually think I would get to do it even? Yeah, of course I did. I suppose I had that sort of thing that anyone who directs or writes music or does anything creative, you have to have some sort of, somewhere in you have to feel your own talent, don't you? You have to sort of have a sense that I can do this. But yeah, it's very interesting you put it like that, because I think it's sort of important that sometimes when you get to my position, you've been through, you've directed a lot and you've been through a lot. And I see it in other people. There's a sort of cynicism creeps in a little bit, and a sort of jaded world weariness, And I think it's important to go back to that little lad somehow or other and say to him, look, this is, recapture that feeling, that dreamer, the kid who really wanted to just love movies, like I'm here talking to you. I have no real desire to be a famous person or even to get much attention directed in my towards me.
You're on the right podcast there.
Yeah, it's not something I'm terrifically comfortable with, but as you know, and you bring it out of me, and you have the same thing. I love stories told in moving pictures. I just love them. I love film stories. There you go. So
I'll send the check.
That's what brings me back, and I try to keep that flame alive, and try when I'm on set just to love the privilege of being there, because it is a privilege when you get to make a film. It costs a lot of money, and people put a lot of money and a lot of trust behind you. So we're very lucky, and I say that on set sometimes when people think I'm being a bit kind of Pollyanna, like, oh God. And I say it sincerely. I say we're privileged. We're lucky to be here.
Jon Wright, as always, an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to welcoming you back. And that brings to an end my conversation with director and co-writer Jon Wright. His film Unwelcome is in cinemas in the UK on the 27th of January 2023. It's also covered in Film Stories magazine. You can find more on that at store.filmstories.co.uk. But that brings to an end this special episode of the podcast. You can find more from me on Twitter at Simon Brew, more from the entire Film Stories project at Film Stories. Head to Facebook and we're at facebook.com/filmstoriesonline. Our website is filmstories.co.uk and our online shop is store.filmstories.co.uk. And if you want to financially support this podcast, you can do so via Patreon and get the ad-free version at patreon.com/Simon Brew. But for now, I'll leave you in peace and get on with the regular episode of Film Stories that will be with you soon. Until then, you all take care, you all look after yourselves. Thanks for listening. I'll be back soon. Bye-bye.